Hello and welcome to Last Week in AWS. I'm Corey Quinn. A fun pair of security challenges last week, because why not? But first, this episode is sponsored by my own company, Duckbill. At duckbillhq.com, we help companies negotiate their cloud contracts, understand what they're getting into, and make big trouble for the Seattle-based Moose and Squirrel Company. For more information, please check us out. You'll get to deal with me and possibly my less entertaining business partner, Mike. Again, that's duckbillhq.com. Now, what did AWS do? EBS now supports up to 4 elastic volume modifications in 24 hours. I always wondered why there was a limit here at all past, rate limits to avoid insane flapping. Resize and test is a pattern. AWS databases are now available on v0 by Vercel. AWS realizes they can't win the newer generation of developers over with arbitrary complexity, so they're pitching databases to them where their workloads live. Smart. Lambda announces cross-account access for DynamoDB streams, finally, fixing what should have been day one functionality, but I'm sure the workaround industrial complex will miss all of those creative solutions involving SQS, SNS, and a prayer. At least they didn't make it a premium tier feature. It figures. I spent a fair bit of time in November replicating a stream between 2 accounts into DynamoDB itself. It's been a while since AWS released a feature right after I worked around, so this feels like a throwback to a happier time. Enhanced Transactions View now available in AWS Billing Console. They fixed the transactions page so it loads in milliseconds instead of go grab coffee and pray minutes. Only took them until 26 to make a billing interface work at reasonable speed. Your accountant will appreciate not timing out while reconciling invoices, which is, again, something we help with at Duckbill HQ. AWS Data Exports adds granular operation visibility for Amazon Bedrock model usage. Finally, you can see exactly which Bedrock API calls are bankrupting you, because nothing says we care about your costs like adding visibility after you've been paying for months. At least your CFO can now itemize their disappointment by operation type. Meanwhile, I've been using Anthropic directly for over a year now, just so I can see per model and pay per API key what's using what. EC2 X8i instances powered by custom Intel Xeon 6 processors are generally available for memory-intensive workloads. Custom Intel Xeon 6 processors available only on AWS is a fancy way of saying Intel cut them a special deal that you'll pay for through instance pricing. These SAP HANA workloads just got 50% faster at extracting money from your budget. At least the licensing savings are real. Opening the AWS European Sovereign Cloud. So they built a whole separate cloud just for Europeans who don't trust AWS. That's some galaxy brain business strategy right there. At least they're honest about it taking an entire independent infrastructure and business unit to convince regulators they won't peek at the data. Note that AWS-Esque is pronounced AWS-Esque because this is kind of AWS-Esque. AWS Organizations now supports upgrade rollout policy for Aurora and RDS automatic minor version upgrades. Finally, a way to test database upgrades in dev before they crater production automatically. Revolutionary stuff, if you ignore the part where competent DBAs have been doing this manually for decades. At least they waited until 2026 to charge you for automation of basic operational hygiene. Provision Oracle database at AWS Stack using CloudFormation. Oracle's running their Exadata boxes in AWS data centers now, and they'll let you provision them via CloudFormation because nothing says cloud native like racking Oracle hardware in someone else's building and charging you OCI prices while you're already paying AWS. This partnership makes strange bedfellows look normal. The AWS CLI V1 maintenance mode announcement. The CLI that launched 1,000 scripts is heading to the retirement home in 2027. At least they're giving you 18 months notice instead of the usual Google surprise deprecation. Time to update those bash scripts before your infrastructure becomes a museum exhibit. Maybe now it can stop being the default GitHub branch? CVE 2026-0830, command injection in Kiro GitLab merge request helper. It turns out folder names can execute arbitrary commands in AWS's agentic IDE, because what could possibly go wrong? Letting AI write code while also parsing untrusted input. Patch immediately, then maybe reconsider whether agentic tools need quite this much agency over your system. And finally, the most milquetoast description, unanchored account ID webhook filters for code build. Security researchers at Wiz found AWS misconfigured their own code build webhooks, letting anyone with the right actor ID commit code to critical repos. AWS fixed it in 48 hours and swears nobody exploited it. This is the second major code build lapse in the past year. Something in the water over there? Pro tip, if AWS can't configure their own security correctly, maybe double check yours. And that's what happened last week in AWS. Tell your friends about this place. Stay salty.